time, and of course, if in the event this doesn't happen, they would not be entitled to these bonuses if we don't pass this bill. That's how significant it is. When you talk about certain health professional bonuses, they would expire also. And these health benefit bonuses are very significant because these are...
Without objection.
Madam President, we're now in about the third day, I think, of a somewhat tortured process that was the result of a power grab that has changed the tradition of the United States Senate, a tradition which is held for about 225 years. Republicans are frustrated with the attempts, successful, made by the Democrat Party under its leader to change the rules, break the rules, to change the rules. And so we end up with no rule relative to protecting the rights of the minority. Now, I know it's easy for those who have been elected in recent years that have never served in the minority because they simply don't have the experience of what it's like to be subject to a leader and a party which basically says, we don't care what you think, we don't care what you say, we don't care what you do, none of it will be allowed unless we give you consent to do it. And I know that a lot of my friends across the aisle have said, well, it's your party that's holding things up. And it's you are making the Senate a dysfunctional institution. What they haven't done is ask, why are you doing this? First of all, I don't believe we're the ones making it dysfunctional, but even if you think that, the question has not been asked, why are you doing this? And we're doing this because we have 3 years of pent-up frustration, or more, under the leadership of our majority leader, who has essentially turned this into the House of Representatives. So people say, well, what's wrong with that? But majority vote rules, I mean, just about on everything else we do. Why shouldn't majority vote rule here? Well, the Senate was not set up that way. It's famously known the Senate is set up to be a place where tempers can be cooled, the passion can be cooled, something can be debated and worked on, and if major legislation is passed that affects significantly this country, that legislation is passed in a bipartisan fashion following significant debate, and we've always had a provision which basically says those in the minority will have their right to participate, have their right to offer amendments, to participate in the debate. We have been shut down from offering amendments, and there's been growing frustration on our side, basically saying, this is not how the Senate has worked traditionally. This is not how it's worked historically. This is not how it has worked according to the Founding Fathers' determination of protecting the Senate, giving it extra long terms, giving members the opportunity to use the agreed-upon rules to achieve the right of someone in the minority to speak up. Now, the Democrats are going to rue the day when they made this move and jammed it down our throats and said, if you don't like it, tough. Because at some point, the pendulum will swing. And I think maybe sooner than a lot of people think. 2014 looks like a turnaround year. And if it is, they're suddenly going to find themselves in the minority. And we'll see, and they will learn, what it's like to be denied the opportunity to be elected to the United States Senate and be a member of this august body, be one of 100 people that are chosen to represent their states and represent the United States of America, and be shut down from having any opportunity whatsoever to have a voice in what goes forward here, to offer your thoughts, your amendment, to represent your state. But to be told by the majority leader, I'll decide whether or not you can have an amendment. And by the way, I'll use procedures to make sure you can't have your amendment. Now, I've had the privilege of serving here on 2 different occasions. I came here in early 1989 and served 10 years in this Senate. I don't recognize this Senate today. I came back in 2010, 12 years later. I don't recognize this. This is not the Senate that I joined in 1989. He was under Democrat control. George Mitchell was the majority leader. The Democrats had the majority. They controlled it. I had served 10 years in the House of Representatives along with my colleague from Kansas, Senator Roberts, who's, I'm sure he was here listening to me speak, and I appreciate that, Pat. We've gone through this same experience. But when I served before, under Democrat leadership, I realized what the difference was between this upper chamber and the lower chamber. Under the genius of our founding fathers, the lower chamber, elected every 2 years to represent the immediate concerns of the people of their state or their district. And the Senate, given the opportunity to step back and take a broader look and work to fashion bipartisan support so that something major that impacted the American people and impacted our constituents was settled and debated and worked out and ground through the process, and gave us an opportunity to say, wait just a minute, do we want to rush to judgment here, or do we want to just step back and look at the larger picture? And so as a minority member of the Republican Party in 1989 and following, all the way up to 1995, I enjoyed and revered the opportunities that I had. And my former members of the House would ask me, so what's the difference between serving in the House and serving in the Senate? And I said, in the House, the majority party rules. And you're lucky if you can get the Rules Committee over there to allow you to have an amendment on a particular bill. Every once in a while it would happen and say, wow, this is special. But in the United States Senate, every minority member, I said, could offer any amendment to any bill at any time. And that is a great privilege that has been afforded to us. But what a necessary privilege, because without it, you get stuff rammed down your throat, it doesn't have bipartisan support, you're denied the opportunity to participate, to amend, to adjust, to be a part of fashioning something that can be accepted by the American people with support from both sides. And so this boiling up frustration has been happening here increasing under the leadership of this majority leader, who simply says, I'm going to turn this into the House. I'm going to change this institution from 225 years of what it once was to something entirely different. And forget it, you guys on the other side, you in the minority. You don't have the rights that you once used to have. I respected Majority Leader George Mitchell. Tough, ran this place like clockwork. We were in late at nights a number of times, but every member of the minority had the opportunity and the right to offer an amendment, the right to participate, the right to be heard, and the right to offer an amendment to a provision. George Mitchell, as leader, recognized those rights. And he would say, guys, ladies, you can offer any amendment you want. We will take it up. We will have a vote on it. You may win, you may lose, but you have that right. So the reason why we're frustrated here, the reason why we're using some procedures now, which denying all of us a lot of sleep that we'd like to have, and at Christmas season we'd like to go out and shop for some gifts for our families. We'd like to make some plans for the Christmas season, and we're stuck here. The reason for this is it boiled over. The last insult was simply basically saying, forget it. Forget the rules and forget the procedures, and forget the courtesy. Forget the privilege. Forget the right that you've enjoyed for all these years in the Senate. And we're going to turn this into a different place, and you just take it or leave it. So we're kind of left with very few resources and able to express how we feel about this. Now, I think there's a solution, an easy solution to our problem. And that is, it starts with number one, an understanding of the frustration each side has. But it has to include the understanding of why they're frustrated. And it's not just the Democrats that are frustrated with Republicans trying to use techniques that will allow us at least to have a say in how things are working here, but also frustration among Republicans in basically saying, bill after bill, time after time, we have amendments that we would like to offer that represent the wishes of the people of our states that we represent, our constituents. And I'm being denied that opportunity by the majority leader.
With a distinguished senator, you.
Well, not everyone calls me distinguished, but I'm happy to yield to someone that does, but also a good friend. And
well, there's a good reason for that. We both came to the House at the same time. We were sorry to lose you to the Senate. But I truly appreciate what you have said here. It reflects conversation that we both have had to try to tell, to try to educate, to try to suggest, basically just to get to know each other a little better with our colleagues across the aisle as to why this is taking place, what our frustrations are. But you have summarized them very well. I would urge my colleagues across the aisle to take your suggestions and your plea, really, in behalf of us all to heart. Would encourage everybody, if they have nothing else to do around here, to read the congressional record and to read your remarks and take them to heart. I remember so well when I came to the Senate in 1996, and you were here, and I had an amendment that I wanted to offer, and being a member of the House for 16 years, what you had to do in the House was to check with the chairman, and we served in the minority, and then the revolution came in 1994, and things changed. But then you had to go to the Rules Committee, which the Senator has pointed out was a very unique experience. And so I remembered then what I had to do to get anything done in the House, and basically I had to find a Democrat colleague, a friend who was serving in the majority, to co-sponsor the bill that I had and put his name first, and then go to the Rules Committee to make it in order so that my bill and his bill could work. My partner in this effort was Congressman Charlie Stenholm. I first went to the Rules Committee in the House. I had not been to the Rules Committee. I thought the debate would be about germaneness or whether this bill should be considered or was it timely, et cetera, et cetera. I find out it was just a debate all over again on the merits of the bill. And on a partisan party line vote, they would deny any Republican amendments. So Stenholm was a partner in the effort with the bill. I can't even remember which one it was at this particular time, but it was my first big attempt. And it was on the Farm Bill. And we had mutual concerns, and we thought it was a good amendment. It was the Robert Stenholm bill. Well, it didn't take me very long to figure out that the Robert Stenholm bill was going nowhere. And so Charlie leaned over and he said, it might be a good idea that this is the Stenholm-Roberts bill, or maybe just the Stenholm bill. I said, I think you've got a pretty good idea. So for a while, it became the Stenholm bill, and it was made in order. Then on the floor, Charlie Stenholm being the kind of member he was, all of a sudden it became the Stenholm, or the Robert Stenholm bill again, and it passed. And voila, my First Amendment on the floor of the House. That was my background. So I had an amendment, and I know the senator remembers well, because we were standing right about down here, and I was asking you, I've checked with the ranking member and the chairman. At that time we were in control, and we had the majority. And I had a very simple amendment. I won't go into it, but at least it was referenced to the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And I was checking around with the ranking member and whatever, and they looked a little surprised that I was even checking with them. And the chairman of the committee, our Republican chairman, indicated, well, I just assume you wouldn't do that because we have a complete bill. We've, put it through the committee. I think your amendment has merit, but, and I knew I had bipartisan support for it. And I knew it was a very easy amendment that would pass. But he told me, just wait, we'll take that up, sometime down the road. Well, down the road in the Senate means way down the road. So I was sort of grumpy, and you asked me what was wrong, and I said, well, the chairman doesn't like it. He said, listen, this is the Senate. You can offer any amendment any time, whether it's germane or not. This is the Senate. You have rights. And I knew that. I had gone to the Robert C. Byrd lecture as a new member, and he lectured me on minority rights and how we should conduct ourselves. He was the institutional flame of the Senate. And you urged me to offer the amendment. I should have done it. But I thought, all right, well, I'll wait. I will defer to the chairman's advice. I've often regretted that. And later, I'm talking about 2 or 3 years later, the same subject came up. I happened to be on the floor. Senator Ted Kennedy was in charge. They had taken back control. And he knew about the amendment, and he said, would you like to get your amendment passed? And he was standing on the floor. There was hardly anybody else here. And bingo, using the parliamentary procedure that you could do in the majority, why, my amendment was passed. It was not the Kennedy-Roberts bill, by the way. It was the Roberts bill. Authorized, didn't get too much money for it, but at least, we made the effort. Now, I've gone into a long personal history here just to demonstrate exactly how this works. Now we have a farm bill that's been hung up for over 2 years. We have a farm bill that the principals are meeting in secret. There are 37 of us that are also on the conference wondering where on earth is the farm bill. The House has just passed by unanimous consent an extension of the current farm bill like we did last year. Well, last year we passed a farm bill. Last year the majority leader in a discussion with me said if you can get it done in 3 days, I'll let it happen. Note, I'll let it happen. And Chairperson Stabenow certainly was working extremely hard on her side. I was working on my side. We were going to the steering committee and said, I think we can get regular order. I think we can get your amendments up. Nobody believed me. We had 73 amendments. We did it in 2.5 days. And once that tipping mark hits with people withdrawing amendments, well, you get your work done. But the minority had every opportunity to offer amendments. So a year ago, considering the Farm Bill, the first amendment was by Senator Rand Paul, considering the Pakistani who helped us with regards to the Osama bin Laden raid, and he was in prison. And so Senator Paul thought it was a good idea to hold the aid to Pakistan until they released the prisoner. What did that have to do with the Farm Bill? Nothing. It was the First Amendment considered. It didn't pass, by the way. And many other amendments that came from folks who had never had an amendment brought up and discussed. Those amendments were discussed in the Farm Bill. I would say that probably of the 73 amendments that were considered, there were 300 offered. And people would get up, and they would have their say. They discussed the amendment. They knew probably it would not pass, and they would withdraw it. But they at least had an opportunity to present their opinion and represent their states and their constituents, and we had that opportunity. This year's Farm Bill wasn't 73 amendments, voted about 10 times. Senator Thune, a respected member of the Agriculture Committee, Senator Johans, former Secretary of Agriculture, Senator Grassley, and myself, we all had a total of about 12 amendments. We withdrew those from consideration from the committee markup and said we'll take them up on the floor, except the majority leader cut it off saying, time out, no more. None of us got those amendments. As a former chairman of the Agriculture Committee in the House and the ranking member last year, what's that all about? I mean, you have a farm bill, you have people on the Ag Committee, they have pertinent amendments with regards to the direction of the bill, and bingo, you're just cut short. That causes a lot of frustration, to say the least. Now, I've gotten into the weeds on this simply because of our friendship and your advice to me, and which I treasure, but your willingness to come and speak from the heart to demonstrate to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, think about this. Think about why we're doing this, and why we're doing this is because if you break the rules, which they have, to change the rules, more especially on nominations, and what is happening is we're packing the district court here in Washington, which is the appeals court, probably more important than the Supreme Court, on all the regulatory matters that come up, i.e. the President's executive orders, the President's waivers, the President's interim final rules, or any agency's interim final rules. We have government by regulation today. We do not have government by legislation today. We have government by regulation. And this court becomes the Senate. And so it was evenly, we had an even number of judges, and now we're going to have 3 more. And so consequently, the President, who says, I can't work with Republicans because he won't work with Republicans, is going to have his way, and it's going to be jammed down our throat. And I know you, when you go back to Indiana, and me, when I go back to Kansas, one of the top issues that we hear about from any economic sector of our economy is what on earth is going on with all these regulations. Somebody holds up a piece of paper, said, Pat, are you aware of this regulation? And I'd look at it, I said, no, I'm not, but I'll check on it. And what is our ability to deal with that? Almost nothing. And so we have government by over-regulation. That's what this is about. So that agenda by the President for more regulation to get his agenda done is going through the courts as opposed to the Senate of the United States. And that's why we are faced here with this situation. That is why I was here from 8 to 9 talking about Iran. You're talking about the issue at hand, and I truly appreciate it. So I thank you for coming to the floor. I thank you for making these comments. I just wish people would understand why we have this frustration. And I think, a more accurate reflection of what is going on here, I know that is not reflected much in the media. I understand that. But that is simply the case.
Well, I thank my colleague from Kansas, and I'm glad he mentioned his own personal experience and our experiences together with this. And you know, it's more than about the senator from Indiana or the senator from Kansas. It's about this institution. It's about the future of the United States Senate. What kind of a body are we going to be? Are we going to be the Senate that has been the Senate for 225 years? With the rights of the minority being able to express how the majority leader can look across the aisle and say the former chairman of the Agricultural Committee, the former Secretary of Agriculture, can't have a say in what the Farm Bill says. I mean, it's a treasure trove of experience. It's a treasure trove of knowledge of the whole agricultural sector, and the majority leader whimsically just simply says, because I'm in power and I can tell you what you can do and what you can't do, forget it. Forget your adjustments to this. But that leads us right in to the most egregious power grab of all, and that was when, under total Democrat control, both in the House and the Senate and at the presidency in the White House, Democrats decided they're going to tell us how we should reshape our health care system and readjust 1/6 of the entire U.S. economy. And by the way, we have all this expertise here, or we think we have this expertise here, and we will wrap all this up in one 2,000-plus page bill, and we will run it down your throats without any input from the other side. Oh, we had input, but everything, the rules were adjusted, the vote was changed, and it was passed by a simple majority, and therefore had no constructive impact from those who did not think this is the right way to address our health care system. And now, look at the mess we are in. We've been talking here for days about calls, not reflecting just our views, but calls from constituents saying, what in the world have you done? Now, many of it, the reason I ran in 2010 is I was so upset about two major things. One, the way the Democrats had essentially just said, take this health care bill, don't worry about reading it. As Nancy Pelosi said, we'll find out later. Boy, are we finding out about it later. Frankly, those who wrote it are finding out about it later. And the people that it has been imposed upon, the people that we represent, are now finding out about it later. And I got a whole packet full here of responses. I don't know if these are from Republicans or Democrats or liberals or conservatives. All I know is they're from my constituents, who I represent, all of them, and trying my best to represent them. And they have flooded my office with tweets and Facebook and all this social stuff that I have a little trouble grasping right now. But emails, letters pouring in, phone calls jammed, people saying, what have you done to us? What are you imposing on us? I can go through here and read horror stories about people and the broken promises. The broken promises on this. You know, I think as the senator from Kansas has understood, we've both been in this business here for a while, you better be careful if you fall in the trap of going home and promising what you can't deliver. Oh, it's so easy to walk in front of groups and say, I know what you really would like to hear, and so I want you to, you know, like me and vote for me at the next election, so I'm going to tell you what you like to hear. It's so easy to go home and promise something that makes people feel good, so they'll feel good about you. But you better be careful, because if you overpromise and underperform, they're going to say, hey, wait a minute. And no one has more overpromised and underperformed than this President of the United States regarding health care. You know, when you say, if you like your doctor, you'll be able to keep your doctor, period. Boy, I bet the President wishes he hadn't said period. Maybe. I'm sure he wishes
Senator, yield on that point.
hadn't said, well, let me just finish and I'll be happy to yield.
Sure.
I'm sure he wishes he hadn't even said that. If you like your doctor, you keep your doctor. I got thousands of people in Indiana are basically saying, hey, I can't keep my doctor, Mr. President, you promised. And you said period. What does period mean? Hey, take it to the bank. Count on it. Final. Finito. No more questions need to be asked. I'm telling you, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, period. Nothing more needs to be said. And the same was said about don't worry, your premiums won't go up. Don't worry, you won't have to have a more expensive plan. Don't worry, you can keep your plan. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. How many hundreds of letters have I gotten from people saying, hey, I love my plan. Why do you think I chose it? I mean, if I didn't like my plan, I wouldn't have selected my plan. And now I get a letter saying, your plan's no good. You got to go into the government's plan. You got to go into the Obamacare plan. And, oh, it's just going to be affordable. Don't worry, folks, no money's going to be spent. Well, were we told about the $400 million that was spent just to fashion the website? Can you imagine how they've screwed up the website? After 3.5 years of notice, they can't even put out the website. Horror stories on getting on the website, which are continuing, by the way. If you can't do that, how are you going to manage the program if you ever do get people signed up? And so on and on it goes. But this idea of promising and now having these promises broken just feeds into the lack of, to the cynicism, the lack of trust among the American people in the institutions of government, and in their elected representatives and in their president. And that is just a cancer in this country. If you can't put your faith and trust in the promises and what's said by the people who are representing you, who are making the laws that you have to comply with, that's a sad day. And so the Senator again has asked me to yield, and I'd be more than happy to yield back to him.
Well, I think the answer was when the President said you can, if you like your plan, you can keep it, period, or your doctor. It wasn't that way, really. It was, if you like the plan, you can keep it, semicolon, or dash dash, or maybe there was a parentheses there. If you can like your plan, or if you like your plan, you can keep it, if I like it. And if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor if it's possible and we think it's all right.
And if I could just add to what the Senator said, if you don't like your plan and if you want something different, we'll tell you what you have to like and what you don't have to like. It's no longer your choice. We'll tell you what you need, what we think you need, but you can't make that decision for yourself. So here's our plans. I mean, you look at our plans and pick one of those, but boy, if you want something different, if you want to go to your insurance company and work something different out for you or your employees or your employment-sponsored plan and so forth, forget it. We know more than you do because we wrote the law, and the reason we wrote the law is because we don't think you have the intelligence or the ability to figure out what's best for yourself. Anyway, happy to use that.
Well, you know, these, if the Senator would yield, and these were called lemon plans, shoddy plans, plans that were denigrated, even though the families involved worked on the plans, had a plan that they liked. I'm sure the same is in Indiana as is in Kansas. More people have lost their insurance that have signed up and been happy with the program. Nobody on our side of the aisle wishes that or doesn't understand the fact that we have a lot to do with health care reform. And I would say that almost every senator has a 5-point plan on what they would like to do, but it's certainly more market-oriented, and certainly it isn't top-down. I'll tell you what is working as opposed to the rollout is the advertising for this, some of which is unbelievable. Every day in the media, and thank goodness the media is now watching and at least paying attention to this, but there was a rap group now that is on television that said it's cool to sign up for Obamacare. Why on earth why are the taxpayers paying for that when every day Secretary Sebelius is changing the game along with the President? I think the President's changed this plan about 17 times. Maybe that's low now. But he should come back to the Congress for that. I think a lot of these changes are unconstitutional, but at least he should come back to the Congress, which gets me back to your basic point. What would have happened had we gone ahead with regular order and sworn in Scott Brown as the new senator from Massachusetts? And then it wouldn't have been on a one-vote margin with regards to Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act, or what it was called back then, the Patient Protection Affordability Act. The acronym for that, by the way, is PPACA, which I think pretty well sums it up. At any rate, had that happened, you would have had to have some kind of a bipartisan agreement, which is really what we're talking about in breaking the rules now so that you don't have to do that. But then they would not swear in Scott, and so there we were on Christmas Eve. None of us knew what was in the bill because it was in Harry Reid's office. As a member of the Health Committee, I was privileged to consider this bill. We worked hard. I had 3 amendments on rationing. I'm worried about rationing. There's 4 rationers. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to take up your time to do that. IPAB is the number one I'm worried about now. They decide the Medicare reimbursement that your hospitals will get in Indiana, my hospitals in Kansas, doctors. That's why in the Finance Committee we're trying to do the SGR reform and the doc fix. But at any rate, we were in the Health Committee. I had 3 amendments. All 3 were defeated by a party line vote. That markup sat on I don't know where it is now, it's collecting dust. It then went to the Finance Committee. I had the same 3 amendments. I wanted to offer the amendments on the floor. we are going to have a lot of problems with these rationing boards making decisions as opposed to individual patients and their doctors, if they can find their doctor, if they can have their doctor, period. So it gets back again to regular order. It gets back into respecting the minority rights. It gets back into protecting minority rights. And had we had those, I think that this bill possibly could have been worked out. I now believe that this bill was proposed by those who really prefer national health insurance, and this was a stalking horse for national health insurance. I don't think anybody on that side of the aisle realized that this bill would be like Thelma and Louise going off into the canyon. But that's what's happened. And so now we have all this mess on our hands, and every day we learn about something new. The Secretary just came out yesterday with additional changes. Don't mean anything because she's just simply urging the insurance companies to go back and talk about those folks that you were talking about the plan that they would like to have or the plan they would like to keep. And she's just saying to the insurance companies, we urge you to do that. What's that all about? The toothpaste is out of the tube. I don't know how on earth you can get that done. There were 4 more other suggestions. Now, I'm getting off subject here because you started out here saying about the rights of the minority. And this bill didn't pass with any Republican votes and very little Republican input, and I think that in part is why it has crashed and is burning right now. If that had not happened, if we had just had regular order input during that particular time, I think there would have been a better product. I probably still would have voted no because I don't want national health insurance. Now, I feel a lot better that I've expressed my rant to you, and it's been a better morning as a result. But I think anybody listening to us could finally understand the depth of our frustration of wanting to be a part of this Senate and having the right to be part of this Senate, but having that right and privilege that everybody had for 225 years has now been taken away. And it will be interesting if, in fact, the pendulum would swing back and Republicans were in control, and what we would do. Would we go back to the 225-year precedent, or would we say, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander? We'll just seek a pound of flesh or two. I don't know what we would do. I would hope that we would go back to the 225-year precedent. It'd be the right thing to do, but it would be interesting to see. Thank you for allowing me to.
Well, I thank the senator from Kansas, a longtime friend and someone I've had the privilege of serving with, getting to know on a personal basis with he and his wife and his family. We're both here with some experience under our belts. And unlike many of our colleagues who may see only one side of the story, we've been on both sides. I think about, I had my differences with Senator Robert Byrd from West Virginia. There was no greater defender of the rights of the minority than Senator Robert Byrd, a Democrat, senator who served his lifetime in the United States Senate. I wish there had been some respect for what Senator Byrd had said, what he would have. I can see him standing on the floor saying it doesn't matter how partisan this is. These are engraved in stone privileges that we have learned, our founding fathers have learned through adverse experience throughout history about denying the minority a voice, a right to participate. This never would have happened if Robert Byrd was here. I know there are new members that just have not experienced what it's like to be said, sit down and shut up. We'll tell you what you can say, what amendment you can offer, if any. And to be told time after time after time, and you know it builds, because as all the bills come up and you've got 5 things you would like to get done this year on behalf of your constituents, and you wait for the next bill to be brought up and you say, Mr. Leader, can I put it on, have an amendment on this bill? Sorry, no amendments. Filled the tree, done. We're going to move forward. And okay, I'll go with the next one. Can I have it on the next one? Here we are at the end of the year. This cycle is over. Done. I'm sorry. You can't represent your constituents with what you think they want to do. Now, maybe you won't prevail, but you'll have been in the fight, and people would have had to put their yes or their no on it. You can go home and say, I gave it everything I had. I didn't win, but I'm fighting for you, and I was allowed the opportunity to do it. And now we're told, now you go home and say, I wasn't even allowed to express your interests, you, my constituents' interests, through offering an amendment to the bill as a member of the minority. I mean, the history of this place, the history of Democrat leaders when they had power, is a respect for that right, for the right of the institution. It's not about Dan Coates or Pat Roberts. It's not about the current state of the Republican Party in the United States Senate. It's about this institution. It's about what goes forward. You want to turn this thing into we got the power, and you might as well just go home. That's what the frustration is. And I hope the new members who look at this and say, well, this should be a more efficient place, and we shouldn't have to go through all this. We wouldn't have to go through all this if you just give us just a chance to participate. But how else can we express to you our frustration other than just at least having the opportunity to slow things down here so maybe you'll listen to us? Maybe you'll reconsider. Maybe you'll go to some of, I wish they had listened to Senator Levin. He's been here a long time. Respected Democrat chairman of the Armed Services Committee, came down and said, we should not be doing this to his own colleagues. We should not, made an impassioned plea, made a very compelling argument, saying we shouldn't do this. And I think back of the Republican leaders and the Democrat leaders, and when they were, whether they were majority leader or minority leader, who both came to agreement that these rights need to be protected. So whether it's Bob Dole or George Mitchell or Trent Lott or Tom Daschle, I mean, all of a sudden, we're cast into a situation here which is sit down and shut up. We got the votes. Tough. That's our frustration. I just tell my colleagues, think about this. Think about how we can get back to what the Senate has been for 225 years, and think about what it might be like for you when you're in the minority. You're going to want to go home and tell your constituents, I'm sorry, the other party rules, and I don't have any power at all. I don't have any ability to represent you at all. I can't offer any amendment expressing your wishes. I don't even have a chance to get it to a vote. I just have to go home and say I was denied the opportunity to even put it for a vote. Gosh, I remember, well, of course, Senator Dole from Kansas and Senator Roberts knows this well. I mean, how Bob Dole would say, look, this is the United States Senate. You got to take tough votes. You're not going to win every one. You're going to have to go home and explain those votes. But this isn't just a deny, don't take tough votes because you don't want to explain it to people back home. Step up, debate it, vote. You might win, you might lose, but we're here to vote. We're here to give everybody the right to have a vote on how they think they can best represent their constituents. They didn't come here to avoid this, to hide behind the desk, to say, oh, this might affect the next elections. I don't want to have a vote on that, vote on this, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I really came down here to talk about the debacle of Obamacare. And I got all these letters, all you have to do is turn on the television or the radio or read the newspaper or talk to your neighbor. I think the word is not, fortunately the word is not spreading about this thing through the media because the media really hasn't. I think even now the media is realizing what a debacle this whole thing is. But all you got to do is talk to your neighbor, whether it's at church or whether it's at bowling league or whatever. I got my termination letter yesterday. Don't know what I'm going to do. Or I've tried 21 times to get into the website. Can't get in. You know what no one's talking about is the fact that, ironically, those who wrote the bill, the President of the United States and his executives, are not forced to, don't have to go into Obamacare. I don't know why this hasn't been more publicized. I mean, is this the ultimate in hypocrisy? You, the American people, we have decided this is good for everybody except us, by the way. So we're exempting ourselves. The President of the United States, all his cabinet secretaries, his political appointees, his major staff, and even some of the staff that wrote the bill exempted themselves. How can you write a piece of legislation, impose it on 300 and some million Americans, and say, well, that's not for me. I mean, that's for you, but since I'm writing it, I can write in here an exemption for myself. I don't know why the media is not all over this. I don't know why we haven't had an amendment from the Democrat side saying, this is wrong. I mean, how do you go home and tell people that my president, my majority leader, staff is exempt, but they're imposing it on all of us? I mean, I wouldn't even want to go home.
It isn't as if we haven't tried.
No, it's not as if we haven't tried.
As the senator knows, senators are under that obligation, and their staffs, however, committee staff is different, leadership staff is different, and as you pointed out, the executive is different. What's that all about? It should be uniform or not at all, and it should be uniform, for everybody who had a hand in this debacle. I even thought about an amendment saying those who didn't vote for it. I voted against this 3 times. Obamacare, once in Health Committee, once in Finance Committee, and once it came out of Harry Reid's office. And he said, did you read the bill? Nobody read the bill because it had been changed. So then you had to wade through it. And then as different events, came about, and one problem led to another problem, that problem led to 2 problems, those problems led to other 2 problems, and we're still finding out about that. But back to your point, I know we can name the senators, Senator Coburn, Senator Blair, others have said, look, let's make this uniform. If it's good enough for Americans, it'll be good enough for us. And that has just not happened.
Well, it's happened to us, and I spent torturous hours trying to sign up in the D.C. exchange, which I couldn't sign up in the Indiana exchange,
right,
or any other exchange. I was mandated to sign up in the D.C. exchange. I just hope that if something happens to me, it happens while I'm in D.C., not in Indiana. But, I'd rather be in Indiana than in D.C.
Sure.
But anyway, we all had to go through this as members. People don't understand that back home. They think we're exempt. We're not. I went through this torturous process only after 2 hours with all kinds of technical problems and so forth and so on, hit the confirm button, not enrolled. So we had to do it all over again. Then I got a confirmation. I told my staff, print out that confirmation. You are enrolled in the D.C. exchange. You're part of Obamacare now. Congratulations, or whatever. I've got the piece of paper. I go down to disperse. My secretary goes down to the dispersing office to confirm it. Coates is not enrolled. What? How about this piece of paper? Well, I know it says you are, but we have no. But maybe there's a technical difficulty here. Does that ring a bell for anybody? And there's horror stories I have on that from people that have tried not just 2 times, 10 times, 21 times to get in.
My wife is much more adept at the social media capability, and so it was up to her. And I thought we were confirmed, only to find out almost before the deadline. It was midnight, and there was a desperation attempt on the part of my staff and myself. I needed help to get this done, so I had to redo it. Now, then the thought occurred to me, we're going to have 2 Pat Roberts in there, one that my wife did and then mine. I hope that's not the case. I think we have it cleared up, but I'm not sure. So we'll find out. I hope we don't have to find out, but we'll find out. And I think that's just a duplication of what everybody's going through in the country. And then what do you do if, in fact, you can't have insurance and you find out about your co-pays and your deductibles and all this, where you're going to sign up and you can't afford it? I'm repeating a sad story that I think everybody knows, but I thank the senator from from Indiana once again for your plea, your heartfelt plea, to make the other side understand the error of their ways. I hope we can fix this. I hope they can see fit to fix this down the road. I doubt that will be the case, and I don't think the country will be better off as a result.
Well, I thank the Senator, and, you know, we mentioned signing up here, the frustration so many people have had. Kathleen from Mooresville, Indiana, called my office in Indianapolis saying, help. She said this, she said, I've spoken to someone at the 1-800 number helpline for the Federal Exchange 21 times since October 21st, when she first began to try to enroll on the healthcare.gov website. 21 times she has tried this. So she calls our office in desperation and tells us, well, at one point I asked if I could be transferred to this advanced resolution group, which was some other group set up to help people who couldn't get into the website, I guess. And the customer service representative said that he did not know how to transfer her to that site. She said, well, I mean, I need help, and how can I get it? So she finally then called the insurer directly to try to enroll. And they said, well, the only way you're going to get this done is if you bypass the whole Obamacare Obamacare website, because we can't do it either. So they finally figured out that she had enrolled through the insurance company. But she felt she needed to let the government site people know so they would not put her on the list that she hadn't enrolled. Right. And so she called up there and finally got to somebody and said, and he said to one word, fine, and hung up. Well, he probably was so frustrated with...
Would the Senator yield just for one more observation?
Yeah.
I was watching the news last night, and many more millions of dollars are now being spent to hire more navigators. So your constituent should have had a navigator. In many cases, there are more navigators now that are being hired from various community organizations, some of which I really wonder about. But in some states where only hundreds have signed up, there'll be more navigators than people that have signed up. And so obviously it's gotten to the point where everybody that's got a problem with insurance ought to have the navigator. And this is a considerable expense. I don't remember now how many millions it now totals up. And a brand new group of navigators is being hired at considerable expense to make this thing work. And the advertising, rolls on. And then the news media about all the problems discovers more and more. And I appreciate, again, the Senator, bringing this to the attention of the American people. And I note that the distinguished Senator from Nebraska is here and even has a chart that will educate the American people.
And I'm happy to yield to him, but I've got about 5 more minutes left, and I just want to wrap up with one last horror story from Doug from Indiana. After 2 weeks of trying to get on the site, the website, he finally was able to at least create a login name and password. Then he's had to try for another week to apply for coverage, never successfully getting through, but finally completed the form, submitted, and then had security questions sent back to him so that they could verify he was who he was. So he received 4 questions. Question 1 was, our records indicated you lived on the following street in the last 2 years. What city is this in? Well, the street they listed is where his sister lived. And she doesn't even use the same last name, so I'm not sure how they came up with this. Doug had never lived there or had any financial dealings with that property. And so, how do you answer, I'm quoting him, how do you answer a question as stupid as that? Because they said, well, we can't verify you because you didn't give us the answer. He said, I've never lived there. That's my sister. Question number 2 was about which county he lived in. I think he got that right. Question number 3 included, they got it right, included his previous employers. Well, the only previous employer listed that was accurate was misspelled, and so Doug said, well, how do I answer that? Question 4 said, our records indicate that you purchased pet insurance in the last 2 years. What's the name of your pet? I mean, you can't make this up. If Seinfeld were still going, this would be a great episode. This would be one of the greatest episodes ever. So Doug had not had a pet for over 10 years, and he has never purchased pet insurance. But they said, what pet insurance did you have? I've got a dog. I don't have insurance on it. Maybe I should. They didn't ask me that question, so maybe I'm okay. So he put down none of the above, and since he put down none of the above, they said, sorry, since you can't answer the security questions, we can't enroll you in Obamacare. I mean, you can't make this up. It's a Hollywood scriptwriter's dream for a soap opera or for a comedy, for Seinfeld. If Seinfeld was still on, I mean, this would be unbelievable. And, of course, every night on the late-night talk shows, we hear all these horror stories and so forth and so on. If it wasn't, it's comical, but it's sad. It is sad. It's an overreach by government that there are limits to what it can do and what it can't do, and we clearly have breached the limit on this one. And I think an apology is due to the American people. And I think we ought to step back and say, let's do this over and do it right. And let's do it with bipartisan support. And let's do the sensible things that are affordable, that will allow people to keep their doctor, that will allow people to keep their health care plan if they like it, and will provide means by which we can address the uninsured, the preconditions, and those that need insurance, but do it in a way that is based on tested free market principles, not on a nanny government that says we know better than you. Boy, have we proven that that is not true. Madam Chairman, with that, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you very much. I want to start out and thank my colleagues from Indiana and Kansas for their discussion of this very important issue. I say this somewhat facetiously, but I've been reading the stories about the rollout of Obamacare just like the rest of us have. What an incredible embarrassment. If there's a state out there that epitomizes the embarrassment of all embarrassments, it's the state of Oregon. Recently, they had not signed up a single person through their exchange. Not one, not a single person in Oregon could get through that. That's notwithstanding that the Democrat governor supported it, embraced it, notwithstanding that the United States senators in this body supported it, embraced it, couldn't find a single person. Well, I just read an article, I think it was this morning, I was catching up on some reading. Somehow, some way, they went out there and they found 44 people in Oregon who have successfully signed up. After all of these weeks since this rollout occurred, they probably went door to door in Oregon and found 44 people who they believe have successfully signed up. We'll see if they actually have insurance or not. Well, maybe we could offer this for that poor state. Maybe we could offer that if they successfully sign up, they get a picture with their governor and their United States senators, their own individual picture. You know, 44 people wouldn't be too many to get through in a picture line. They probably have fundraisers that are twice that big or 3 times that big where they do pictures with everybody. I think those persistent citizens of the great state of Oregon deserve something more than just a mention that they're one of 44 in some newspaper somewhere that they successfully navigated the site. I would offer that I think they need a picture, an autographed picture of their United States, with their United States senators and their governor. Well, let me move on to something far more serious, and I'm going to talk about Obamacare too, and I'm going to tie that into why I believe that this process we're going through relating to our constitutional right to advise and consent the President of the United States when it comes to his appointments, I'm going to tie that into why I believe that has all happened and why we find ourselves here today because of this failed Obamacare system. Yesterday, when I was on the floor, I talked at some length about the history of filibuster changes. I mentioned that I have a tremendous amount of respect for a senator that passed not all that long ago, served in this body for a long time, probably knew this body better than anybody who ever served in the history of the Senate. That would be Senator Bob Byrd. Came here and he was in failing health by the time I arrived in the Senate just about 5 years ago, but what a wonderful man. Got to know him a little bit. We actually worked together on a climate change amendment, and the knowledge that this gentleman had of the Senate was just always amazing to me. Well, on the 200th anniversary of what's called the Great Compromise, when the whole concept of the United States Senate was created, some people went to Senator Byrd and convinced him that speeches that he had given on the floor of the Senate and historical writings that he had done should be put together in a book. And it would be commemorative of the 200th anniversary of the United States Senate, the Great Compromise. And so that was done. When I first got to know Senator Byrd, I became so impressed with the man that I decided that my Senate office needed that historical record from him. Well, I thought I was buying a book. I wasn't buying a book at all. I was buying 4 books. 4 books filled with beautiful information about the Senate, its history, people who had served here, people who stood up for the United States Senate and therefore stood up for the people they represented in the United States of America. I talked a little bit about that history yesterday leading up to filibuster changes, and it was the system here originally in the original part of our country, in fact, until the early 1900s, that basically there wasn't a way to end debate. So if a debate was going on, an individual senator could come to the floor and literally take a bill down a path where it may never become law. And somehow, some way through the years, the Senate figured out a way to operate with that kind of an unusual situation where a single senator could take a bill down that road. Well, along came World War I. Now, if you think about World War I, there were many members in the body who had pretty close relatives in Germany. And this was a challenge because you had to debate and decide issues relating to that war in that country. And as we might expect, it became very, very difficult to get things passed. Well, a piece of legislation came forward, and you can imagine what happened. It got carried down this road of never seeing the light of day. And they couldn't get that legislation passed, although that legislation was considered very, very important by many in our country, maybe the vast majority of people in our country. And the country reacted to that, and there was a big debate, and I think people in this body and people in the country came to the conclusion that kind of this open-ended process where debate may never end and there was no vehicle or mechanism to end that debate, well, that had to end. That somehow, some way, the wisdom of the individual members in this body had to be brought to bear on how to allow senators to have their day, have their say, be able to come here and debate the great issues and offer amendments, how could we allow that to happen and give them their rights as United States senators while still having an ability at some point to stop the debate and cast a vote? Well, the United States senators, in their wisdom, decided that they had to find that way, and they did. And so originally, if I remember the history correctly, and I may have this piece not quite accurate, but I think they agreed that 2/3 of the senators could vote at some point to end debate and then vote on the legislation. But senators still had the right to offer amendments. They still had the right to come to the floor and debate. They still had the right to work through the day and the night and build coalitions to get their amendments passed, to shape a piece of legislation, to make that legislation maybe better for the country or for their individual state. All of those rights continued to exist. Because after all, everybody recognized that the power of an individual senator to do that was significant to our country. It was important to our nation, not only then, but in the future. So that process went on for a number of decades following that decision. And then in the 1970s, a decision was made, again by this body, under its rules. And that decision basically said when 60 senators come to the floor and they agree to end debate, that we would get ourselves to a point where that debate would terminate. And you could vote on passage of the bill. You could vote on getting that bill done. So 60 votes in the 1970s became the norm. Now, important point to mention here is this. The rights we have as individual senators representing our constituency, which in my case is the great people of Nebraska and the people of the United States of America for that matter, those rights were intended to exist in every respect. In other words, I could come to the floor as a United States senator under the rules. And if a piece of legislation was there and I had an important issue that I wanted to bring to the attention of the country or this body, I could offer an amendment. And except under certain circumstances, that amendment didn't even need to be germane. I remember, for example, when this health care bill was passed, there was a provision that if somebody in business bought over $600 worth of items, that they had to file forms with the IRS at 1099 and give a form to the vendor. Now that's a mess, because you never know if the first purchase on January 1 is going to be the last purchase or the first of a series of purchases that get you over $600. And I wanted to get that out of the bill. It didn't make any sense. Even the citizens advocate for the IRS was saying, well, gosh, we've looked at this. It doesn't make any sense. So we started working, and on every piece of legislation that would come forward, I'd offer that amendment to get rid of the 1099 requirement in the health care bill. Well, originally, I was nearly laughed out of the chamber. Democrats who had passed the bill were basically saying to me, you want us to change our bill? Get lost, you know. Well, I came back a second time. I came back a third time. I came back a fourth time. The business community got involved, and small businesses started calling their senators and saying, Senator, please, look at what Mike is offering here. This is sensible. This needs to happen. And we offered it a fifth time. And at some point, the President of the United States in the State of the Union, I was sitting right there about 2 rows back from where he was. Madam President, I wasn't any further from the President of the United States than I'm standing from you today. And he mentioned he mentioned that it was time for this provision to go. And so we offered it a sixth time. And then we offered it a seventh time, and we finally got it done. And you know what? I didn't go out and crow about, my goodness, I must be the smartest senator in the body, or I must be the best Republican in those evil Democrats. I didn't do that at all. I went out and I said to the public, this is a very important thing for small businesses. I'm glad my colleagues agree with me and we can all take credit for this. Go back home and tell people you supported it. There were very, very few that voted against it in this body. So an issue that started out with basically no support to speak of in a bipartisan way not only got huge bipartisan support, over 80 votes, it even got a mention by the President of the United States in his State of the Union address as something that needed to get done. And we could all take ownership of it then and today. Well, why do I mention that point? I mention that point because those rights continued after those filibuster changes. This body came to the conclusion that under the Senate rules it was appropriate to somehow get to a point where we could say, okay, everybody, you've had your day. It's time to bring the debate to an end if we can get sufficient votes. And if we can't, well, then we can't. And this bill's probably not going to go any further. And that's been the history of this institution literally from its beginning. Read Bob Byrd's book, Senator Byrd's books. He will explain that to you. And as you read what he is saying there, you begin to feel the admiration that he felt for this United States Senate. But the other thing you'll begin to feel as you read through those books is this. You'll begin to feel how deeply he cared about the individual rights of each senator, whether they were in the majority, whether they were Democrat, whether they were in the minority, whether they were Republican. You see, Senator Byrd understood that the pendulum does swing. There'll be times where Republicans will be in control of the United States Senate. The voters will decide that. There will be times, therefore, that Democrats will be in the minority. He also understood that there would be time when Democrats would be in the majority and Republicans would be in the minority, and that as our country would go through various transformations in various political processes, we would end up with a different Senate depending upon what happened in each election cycle. But the one thing that Senator Byrd wanted to emphasize and hold as a sacred constant in our system of government was that each senator had rights, and that each senator could come to the floor and exercise those rights, whether the person they called leader was Democrat or Republican. And he wanted to make sure that the tyranny of the majority would never silence those rights of the minority or the individual senator. Now, with that context in mind, Madam President, let me review the events of the last few weeks. With that context in mind, I am hoping that that is instructive relative to what happened here. I said yesterday during my comments on the floor, I guess we'd all like to probably think that we're the smartest United States senator that's ever served in the body. We're not. Some of the giants of this great country have served in this body. Some of the intellectual giants that have ever lived in the United States found their way to the United States Senate. And they not only worried about what was happening in their period of history, they worried about what the Senate would be 10 and 20 and 100 and 150 years in the future. Keep in mind, this body has been here over 200 years. And in many respects, as Senator Byrd points out in his book, the rules that we operate on are similar. Why? Because they were smart in the beginning and they're smart today. And they have served us well for over 200 years. Now, like I said, I guess we'd probably all like to think we're about the smartest senator that ever served. And I could tell during the vote right before Thanksgiving that there were some senators who were kind of crowing about this change that had occurred here. And I even read some newspaper articles that, boy, their day had arrived. So what happened? Let me tell you what did not happen. Under our rules that govern how we operate, how we pass laws, how we debate the important issues of the day, we can amend our rules with 67 votes, a two-thirds majority. It's right there in the rules. What a thoughtful provision. The whole idea behind that provision was you don't want the tyranny of the majority to crush the minority. You don't want the tyranny of the majority to crush the rights of the individual senator, whether he's from Nebraska or California or Florida or wherever. So in those rules, it takes 67 votes. Did that happen before Thanksgiving? Did members who wanted to see this done come over here to this side and say, you know, Mike, think through this with me. Please join with me in trying to get this done. I can't get it done with 55 Democrats. I need your help to get to 67. And that's going to take Democrats, and it's going to take Republicans, and it might even take an independent or two to get this rule change done. Is that the way this happened? No, not the way it happened at all. So what did happen right before Thanksgiving? The majority leader, in essence, when you cut through everything, asked for a ruling from the chair. The ruling by the chair was consistent with the rules of the United States Senate. And then the majority leader said, I will appeal the ruling of the chair. What does it take to overrule the chair? It takes a majority vote. And all of a sudden, on executive appointments, circuit court judges across the United States of America, a lifetime appointment, I remind you. There's no way they can be removed except by impeachment process once there, and federal district court judges across the United States of America, the rule was changed. By two-thirds vote, as the rules would contemplate, no. By appealing a correct ruling of the chair and overruling it with a majority vote. Now, like I said, there's probably many here that would like to think, boy, I thought that up. I must be pretty much the smartest person that ever served in this body. Can't imagine why somebody didn't think that one up before. Don't fool yourself. That was thought up many times. Read the writings of Senator Byrd. Read the writings of any great intellectual that has looked at the Senate and how it operates and understands the rules. We have known for decades and decades and decades, maybe since the beginning, that you could appeal a ruling of the chair and make reality out of a majority vote, even though the chair ruled correctly. And that's what happened. I spoke of the tyranny of the majority. The Senate was never intended to be a majority-based body. Let me get back to the Great Compromise. I mentioned that when Senator Byrd decided to put all of this information together in that 4-volume set, it was to honor 200 years of history of the United States Senate, or stated another way, 200 years since the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise came about because when we as an infant country decided there were going to be 2 houses in our legislative process, almost immediately our founders decided that one house, the House of Representatives, would be population-based in majority rule. Now, if you're California or New York, as it's turned out, that works pretty well. If you're Nebraska or South Dakota, not so well. Why? We have 3 members of the House. Seems to me every day of the week California is going to outvote Nebraska. New York's going to outvote Nebraska. Florida's going to outvote Nebraska. Darn near anybody in the country is going to outvote Nebraska. Our population, although we have this very large land mass, our population is 1.7 million to 8 million people spread out across this very large land mass called the great state of Nebraska. Well, our founders looked at that and said, you know, it doesn't take much to figure out this isn't going to work out very well over time. And it's a majority-based body. So political parties have been a feature almost from the beginning of our country. So if you're in the majority, you're always going to win. You're always going to beat the minority as long as your team sticks together. But they wisely said, the Senate's going to be different. The United States Senate is going to be that body where every state gets 2. You see, in that regard, Nebraska is just as powerful as New York. We're just as powerful as Pennsylvania. We're just as powerful as California. Madam President, we're just as powerful as Hawaii. Why? Because we each get 2. And then the Senate was structured in a way, as I have pointed out, where literally from the beginning you could debate a bill right down to a pathway where it wasn't going to get passed. And thoughtfully and carefully, but under the rules of the Senate, what was happening is as we decided to limit debate at some point in the process, you had to get this supermajority. Senators knew they could appeal a correct ruling of the chair and reverse it. But they knew that that option should never be used. It didn't get its name nuclear option by accident. And most recently, when Republicans were in control, the threat was made we might go to the nuclear option to get our judges confirmed. And oh my goodness, Democrats in this body rose up. They were offended that those words would even come out of a United States senator's mouth. They were fighting tooth and nail to stop that because it so changes what happens in this body. Well, now what has happened is the worm did turn. They are in power. All of a sudden, you know, I reserve the right to change my mind. So just before Thanksgiving, a correct ruling of the chair was overturned on a pure party line vote where Democrats said to each individual senator who is a Republican, where Democrats said to each individual member who sits in the minority, a Republican, sit down and shut up. That's what this rule change does. It relegates my voice as a member of a minority party in the United States Senate on district judges, executive appointments, and circuit court judges, 2 of those being appointments for life. It renders my voice absolutely, positively meaningless. No Democrat has to cross that line and come over here and say, Mike, I want you to look at this judge in wherever, let's say Arkansas, because I think they're qualified. And I want you to think about voting for them. They don't have to do that anymore. They don't need me. They can just outlast me, just like they're doing right now. And they can bring this to a vote, and on a straight party line vote, they can appoint the entire judiciary of the United States in the district courts and in the circuit courts with absolutely no involvement whatsoever from the minority. None. That's what their rule change did. Now, let me take that rule change and think out loud about where we put ourselves as a country. I wonder who was the first United States Senator in our history who came to the floor and said, my fellow senators, I have thought about this, I have contemplated it, maybe I have even prayed about it, and I believe the day has arrived to end slavery in the United States. And I will be attaching an amendment to every bill to end that horrific practice. I'll bet they were a very lonely United States Senator at that point in our history. But I'm also guessing that that senator and tenacious other senators along the way exercise their rights as a minority and as an individual United States Senator to continue to force that issue. What a courageous, remarkable thing to do. So let's think about where we're headed here. We now have a precedent. And as Bob Byrd points out in his writings, precedents voted on by United States senators have significant binding effect in this body. It's not something you do one time, tear up, and throw away. It's something that becomes a part of the heart and soul of this body. It is something that is a method of operation, a rule, if you will, by which future decisions are made within the United States Senate. And what's this precedent? This precedent is not that Democrats or Republicans have to cross the aisle and get 67 votes together to change the rules. This precedent now is that you can ask for a ruling of the chair can correctly deliver a ruling, you can get your team together, Republican or Democrat, and you can vitiate, overrule, annihilate the correct ruling of the chair to get a different result. So for the first time in our history, we are now confirming judges in the circuit court, in the district court, and executive appointments under a majority rule for the first time in history. Why? Was it because 67 senators said, look, let's do it this way? No. It's because the majority leader asked for a ruling from the chair gave a correct ruling, and then the majority leader stepped in and said, I'll appeal that, kept his Democrats together, successfully appealed it by keeping the Democrats together, and all of a sudden, we're off in a different direction. So let's think about this. Let's say that you're a Democrat president, and the Senate is Democrat. Maybe it's evenly divided, but you got the vice president and the chair who can break ties. And you're in the last 18 months of your time in office, and you've already won a re-election, so you're term limited, 18 months, you move on down the road. Let's say that you've got a Supreme Court of the United States that 4 of the members are conservative, 4 are what would be regarded as liberal, and you've got 1 member kind of right in the middle. And whenever there's a major argument before the Supreme Court of the United States, that one in the middle, everybody's trying to guess. Which way? Going to side with the liberals on this one? What's he or she done in the past? Or will that Supreme Court justice side with the conservatives? What's he or she done in the past on these kinds of issues? Can we kind of get a roadmap of what they might do on this major constitutional issue? And for whatever reason, that Supreme Court judge dies in office, becomes ill, can't perform the duties, decides to retire, decides, look, I've been here a long time, it's just time for me to move on. Maybe they even have an inkling that they want this president to appoint their replacement. My goodness, this is a pretty important issue. You've got that one vote who kind of moves back and forth, and this is pretty darn critical for the next 50 years or 25 years or 10 years of the United States. It could make all the difference in the world. Well, let's say that the President of the United States takes a look at that and says, 18 months, I'm not sure I can get this done, and calls up his friend, the majority leader in the United States Senate, and says, my friend, how do we move this Supreme Court nominee that I'm going to announce tomorrow before I leave the White House? We need to get this done. Maybe it's not even 18 months. Maybe it's 12 months or 6 months. But how do we get this done? Well, the majority leader says, Mr. President, you know, under the current rules, we did pass that rule in 2013, right before Thanksgiving. We took the voice away from the minority So on circuit court or district court, I could help you out, but we didn't apply that rule to the Supreme Court. Or maybe it's even further down the road, and parties have switched, and there's a Republican in the White House, and the Senate is Republican, and the majority leader's Republican, and the Republican president calls and says, how do I get this done? Well, my friends, let me remind us again, the precedent is set. And let me remind us again, as Senator Byrd points out in his very scholarly analysis of the Senate, that a member-voted change, appeal of a ruling of the chair is a big, dang deal. It's how we operate. And the majority leader says, let me think about it. Calls the president back and says, you know, here's how you get there. I will ask for a ruling of the chair at the appropriate time. Don't know exactly when that will be, but at the appropriate time, you have my commitment, Mr. President, just like they did right before Thanksgiving in 2013. I'll ask for a ruling of the chair. The chair is going to rule against me. I want you to be aware of that. So if you're watching the proceedings, don't faint, because this isn't over. I need to have you go to work like President Obama did in 2013 and make sure that the members are in line, and I'll go to work and I'll turn my whip team loose and we'll keep our team together. Let's say that it's a Republican situation and all of a sudden you've got the ruling and the majority leader says, I want to appeal that. And the team stays together. And now we can change the complexion of the United States Supreme Court because the precedent is set. Now, I had somebody from the Democrat side yesterday say to me, well, Mike, I'd never agree to that. I thought about the comment made, and in fact, I was trying to get to sleep last night and I thought about the comment. And it's just so obvious to me. I wish I had said it to my friend and colleague. I wish I would have said, you won't have a voice because you're in the minority. Under the precedent set right before Thanksgiving, your voice was silenced. You were told to sit down and shut up because of the passage of this rule. So huff and puff all you want, go to the floor, scream, cry, yell, threaten to do whatever you're going to do, but at the end of the day, you don't have a voice because my team's together on this. And by a majority vote, we're going to overrule a correct ruling of the chair, and we're going to pave the way for a new Supreme Court justice who will decide cases based upon our philosophy. And you know what? We're going to go a step further. We think those 4 Republicans there or 4 Democrats there, they haven't gone far enough. So we're going to get somebody that's really out there. And you know what? The precedent is set. You've got the pathway to get it done. Now, is there anybody in this country who believes for a moment that that temptation won't be just too darn great? I mean, look at how many times did my colleagues on the other side of the aisle during the last debate on this a few years ago say, never do this. It will destroy the Senate. We aren't going to do this. They signed letters. And those same people voted yes to break the rules, to change the rules. These same people came in here, and of course they had a reason. Of course, they came in and said, well, you know, it's the evil Republicans. I really didn't want to do this. I feel so bad about doing it, but they're so darn bad, and they're so evil, and they're so obstructionist. When there was no evidence to support it. But the reality is, it's not what's happening these days. It's not what is happening over the next year on circuit court appointments or district court appointments, or who's going to be the undersecretary of the deputy of something in the USDA. It is what's going to happen next when that president has that short a period of time to leave a lasting imprint on this great country, and they can't pass the opportunity. And so all of a sudden, the precedent is set, and you're off to the races. Now, some may be saying, you know what, Mike, if that ever happens, I'm going to call my United States Senator who's in the minority, whether Republican or Democrat, and I'm going to chew on them up one side and down the other side. I'm going to point out to them that if they don't do something about this, that I'll run against them. Or I'll find somebody to run against them, because this can't happen to our country, because Supreme Court appointments, you can't get rid of them once they're there unless it's some kind of impeachment process. This is a lifetime appointment. Once done, it is over. And you know what that minority member will say to all those calls, and they will come in by the hundreds, the thousands, if not the tens of thousands? Thank you for your call, but I have been silenced. I have no ability to stop that. I am in the minority. It won't be a situation where that senator will be able to say, you know, I'm just not persuasive enough. I don't think I can build the argument. It will be a situation where they say, well, I'm in the minority. My voice has been silenced. And so you have a situation where the precedent is set, and that member now has really no voice. Now let's think about this in the last minutes that I have, because it doesn't end here. Again, keep in mind the precedent is set. Let's say again that there's a very important piece of legislation. Maybe it's a health care bill. Maybe it's a climate change bill. Maybe it's a bill to do whatever. I could think of a whole bunch of bills on either side that people would like to see get done. And all of a sudden, the majority, working with their president in the White House, realizes really the only way it's going to get done, because they can't get the 60 votes necessary, is to try to change how things operate here. Well, not to worry, because the precedent's been set. Ask for a ruling of the chair. The chair will correctly rule. Keep your team together. Overrule the chair. And by a majority vote, we now pass legislation by a majority. Now, many in the chamber who are majority or minority would say, well, Mike, I don't like that. Gosh, I'm not going to let that happen. Well, I heard that before. Because the same people that voted for this argued forcefully just a few years ago We can't ever let this happen. This would destroy the United States Senate. This would destroy the purpose of the Senate. But then they came in here and voted for it. Of course it will happen. The precedent is set. And then you have a different country. Let's think about that. I've traveled all over the world in my role as a governor and as the Secretary of Agriculture trying to sell our ag products. There were certain parts of the world where markets were open and the economy was working and people were employed and there were good markets for our products. There were other parts of the world where, my goodness, even today not much is going. People live in poverty. They live in crime, in filth, in disease, and it's just horrific. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's a complex thing. But one of the constants in that was the political instability of the country. Whoever won got the spoils. And so they'd throw out everything that the last group passed. And they'd pass a whole bunch of new things because they had the majority. And then the voters would rebel and say, oh my goodness, did we make a mistake on this? Let's get rid of these fools. And then a whole new group would come in on the other side. And they'd throw out all the laws that the last group had passed, and they passed their own laws. Why? Because they got the majority. And on it went. And businesses would look at that and say, well, how do we ever invest there? You're asking me to build a $25 million warehouse to do my work when I don't know what the laws are going to be 4 years from now or 2 years from now? Because the elections will determine that. You see, ladies and gentlemen, in the United States of America, we have had this remarkable economy for over 200 years. It's had good times and bad. I'm not Pollyannish about this. But jobs have been created. Small entrepreneurs, and I could name them, build businesses that grew into remarkable companies. I mean, it's just incredible. Who are the next ones? What an amazing country we live in. Now, again, I'll acknowledge there's a lot of reasons for that. We're blessed with enormous resources, and I could go on and on. Our education system. But one of the reasons why it has worked here is we have tremendous governmental stability. Whether we want to or not, every administration is kind of in a position where they build upon the shoulders of the last administration. Now, what's the constant there? Well, the White House can change every 4 years. It has to change every 8. The House of Representatives can change every 2 years. And it often does. Sometimes it doesn't. And it's a majority-based body. So a new group comes in, they throw things out, new group passes new things. It's just kind of always moving and shaking. That's what the House was intended to do. What's been the constant in all of this? The United States Senate. Now, I know people get frustrated. They look over here and say, geez, Mike, I wish you could pass something. Why can't you get more done? Why is this pace so frustrating? And I will tell you, as a former chief executive, a mayor, a governor, a cabinet member, I sometimes come in here and go, my goodness, I'm going to be 80 before this law ever passes, and I won't even recognize it. It's the give and take of the United States Senate. It is exactly what was contemplated. And you know what? No one was going to come in and throw this out in 2 years and put this in and then 2 years later throw this out. Why? Because the United States Senate said, wait a second here. Not only are we going to call this the Great Compromise, but you're going to have to reach across the aisle to get things done. And you know what? Sometimes in our history, that hasn't happened. At other times in our history, it has happened. But through pandemics, world wars, crises, attacks upon our nation, this body found a way to function and a way to stabilize the United States. So when a young entrepreneur went out there and said, if I build this software according to the tax laws that we have now, will those laws be there 2 years from now? Yeah, we can say they will be. We don't change the tax code very often. I'm one of these people that argue we need reform in our tax code. But having said that, I know I'm going to have to get it done in a bipartisan way. But ladies and gentlemen, the precedent is set. We know now that if the majority leader asks for a ruling of the chair, and Madam President decides correctly under the rules of the Senate in consultation with the parliamentarian how that issue should be decided and decides it correctly under the rules, we know now what we feared over the last decades, and that is that the majority leader can say to Madam President, I want to appeal your ruling. I want to appeal your ruling. I want to get this Supreme Court justice on the Supreme Court in a lifetime appointment. I want to appeal your ruling because I'm sick and tired of the other side not cooperating with me on what I want done. I've had enough of it. I'm going to get my way. My team is together. They're all going to vote just like me. And even though your ruling was correct under our rules, we're going to set that aside. We are going to vitiate it. And we're going to get our way because my team is in control. That's where we're at today. You see, these rules have been changed over time. They were changed in accordance with our rules. I see the leader is here. Madam Chair, I will yield the floor.